Welcome to another Alkebulan Awakening series. Sorry for the delay, but our esteemed guest is here and is basically worth the wait. My name is Oladile Dosumu, the co-founder of Emerging Alkebulan, and we're about decolonizing the mind and awakening our spirits. My sister.
Habari gani, karibuni, asanteni kwa kuwa nasi. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, I am Nduku. I am a Mwana Ubuntu, a woman passionate about reclaiming our Ubuntu narratives and giving a voice to those who have been silenced for too long, encountering the Western media's falsehoods about who we are and reclaiming our way of Ubuntu. It's good to be here.
And our elder.
This is Professor Small. I'm an African teacher. I'm an African man. I'm an African father. I'm an African husband. I'm an African grandfather. That's enough definition. If we fulfill those roles, we're doing our work. At least we're getting some of our work done. So that's who I am. Everything else is just people wanting to. A lot of times, people give you titles and definitions so that they can make you acceptable to them. Well, I'm just an African man trying to finish my life on earth and do what the ancestors sent me here to do to make it better for the ancestors to come back again, because that's who we are.
It's interesting you say that, and we before we got on, we were talking about, okay, what are we going to talk about? How do we start? But clearly, the ancestors are guiding us. So, Mwalimu Small, just what you just said now is something that I would like to ask you to break down. These titles that we're given because they want us to be acceptable to them, and these titles that some of us hold on to that really do not serve our community. And the simple understanding that just you operating as a father, a grandfather, a mwalimu is already you serving community. Let's start there. That's a good place to start.
Mm-hmm. Like, I'm just returning from Trinidad. I went to Trinidad because my birth shrine, I'm born in South Carolina in the United States. My grandmother was a traditional priestess. We call them a root woman here in this country. And, you know, when you're in a family of a traditional healer, you suffer anywhere in the world. But because we lived in an African village deep in the forests and on this old plantation, we didn't suffer as much as those who had to do their work in the urban centers because we were free. I grew up in the woods, in the river, in the ocean. I didn't even know I was being raised by Africans in African until I went to Africa. And I go, oh, this looks just like my village. Oh, they sew the nets the same way. Oh, they wear the things on their head the same way. Oh, they carry the load on their head. Mm-hmm. Everything we did was being done in the villages at home. But my grandmother had told me very early on when I asked who we were, because I heard the people who called us the N-word and the Negro and all the other things. But my spirit never accepted that because we weren't taught that way in my house. And we were taught not to even associate with the people we call the demon rats from the mountains. They couldn't come in our yard. Even our dog would not allow them to cross a certain threshold. It took me years to understand that dogs think just like the families who raised them do. Right? And so I lived in that world. And when Mama told me, I was about 17 when she told me we were from Africa. Mm. And this is an old lady. She didn't write English or read English. She, but she was the priestess. Her father came from the Tutsi, Uganda area, that area. Her mother came from Sierra Leone, the Mendi people, And so she was a very strong, powerful lady. They call her Miss Pigeon. And so she gave me my definition of myself. Like she gave my brothers and sisters, with whom I'm very close. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, one's going to be angry because I got home and I haven't called him yet, the eldest, and says I'm back home. We still operate like that. If I'm leaving home, I call my elder brother. Where I'm going, I call my elder brother. I get back home, I tell him I'm back in the house. Mm-hmm. We still do that. We were like that since we were children. So what I try to say, and many of our people, they would rather call me Professor Small or say what university you went to, because in their subconscious, if the white man has granted me authority, then I'm worthy to be listened to.
Talk about it.
That's why I hate that. I would prefer being called Brother Small, you know, or any of mine. I have multiple traditional names from different cultures that I've studied in. You know, Obenjoko Adebayo is my
Adebayo.
Yoruba name.
Oh, I love
just
that.
came from a shrine where I took some of my children and we spent 3 days just to cleanse ourselves. Heavy spiritual cleansing to come back to the world. And I went all the way to Trinidad to get that done because that place I trust. Those spirits in that shrine, I trust. I know those gods. They know me. They gave birth to an aspect of me. And it's the most peaceful place on the planet Earth. To stand before Shango on one side, Mother Oya on the other side, or Batala in front of me, or Shoshi over in the corner, you know, or Lokun in the side. Asking
I like that.
Yeah, to clear the way. People
Wow.
say, who are they? These are aspects of the divine itself as defined by our ancestors for our comprehension. You understand? We may call them deities or God, but we got to understand clearly in African sacred science what these are. These are forces of energy, configurations of energy that is attached to your very being and all the rest of the universe in their peculiarity. And our ancestors identified them and says, okay, this is the way we will know them. And this is the way we will address them. And this is the way we will attach ourselves to the understanding of them so we can be a part of them, you know? And so if one was to write, somebody said, well, y'all don't have a Bible. Well, you could write for eternity and you will not be able to copy all that is necessary to be in a Bible on African sacred science. It's impossible. It is impossible to put the universe in a book. Absolutely impossible. We are the universe. What we call African sacred science is our ancestors' gift to us, the understanding of the universe as they were able to discern it on our behalf. And then we are the same ancestors in the next cycle of their being. Our children will be the same ancestors in the next cycle of our being. We're forever eternal. We're not dying and gone.
Exactly.
Nothing in nature does that. People say, oh, but we put you in the ground and you rot, and we go there and there's nothing but dust. Well, all the fruits you were eating, all the vegetables you were eating, even the meat you ate the vegetable which came from the dust and the minerals of the dust. We're just dirt. We're made up of dust. And we're fire. We're energy that comes from all the light in the rest of the universe. But we are configured in this manner to respond to ourselves. The universe is ourself, and we are an aspect of that self responding to itself. That's a little bit of how I see our sacred science. Now, the West have taken aspects of our sacred science and they simply call it science. What the West is calling physics, geometry, even the study that they call anthropology, astrology, astronomy, this is all African sacred science that he has taken the divine out of and made himself the divine of. Y'all understand that? Is there clarity, simplicity there?
We do,
if we really understand that, we'll understand why there's a war between us and them. It isn't that there's something evil in the way we view evil from the Christian perspective. You're good, you're evil. No, they are the necessary evil for balance in the universe. The problem is when we desire to be that evil rather than the good, which makes us the other necessary balance in the universe, things go awry, like it is now. Thinking, oh, we can solve the problem if we just adopt their democracy. Or we can solve the problem if we just adopt their capitalism. Or we can solve the problem if we just adopt their cultural mores and methodology. Or we can solve the problem if we just adopt their language. Don't you see that all of those things that they are that we want to adopt are the very things that's killing us, destroying us, defaming us, minimizing us, polluting us? So when we adopt them, we become the polluter, the murderers, the oppressors of our own self. How can you kill your ancestor in your mental space and be a living being? Now that's what is not. I don't want to be too hard. I'm trying to make African sacred science as an understood motif.
Yes.
Simple.
But this what we call being too hard, right? Which is speaking truth, which should not be actually seen as being hard. It is simply an elder in our community who has reclaimed his Ubuntu being, telling us that what we are holding on to is destroying us.
Yes.
It will hurt because we are comfortable holding on to this thing, but that hurt is temporary. If we listen and we act accordingly and return, and we'll be grateful for this hard, right, approach that you have.
Absolutely.
But it's necessary. It's necessary for us to tell the painful truth so that we can reclaim who we are.
Yep, that's why we're here.
So you're absolutely right. Yeah, the way you break it down. Because it's like having a surgery to get a foreign object out. It will be painful. You will bleed some. They have to sew you back up. But if you don't get that foreign object out, it will poison your system and you will die.
Exactly. And it's actually a good segue. And like I said, clearly the universe, the way of Ubuntu is guiding us. One of the audience members asked, and I'll go here because I wanted to go here and I didn't know how to go here.
Yeah, we were going there anyway,
Give us your perspective of Ubuntu, the way of Ubuntu, and also a quick summary. And I'm not going to ask you about for a summary. I'm taking that out because we Africans do not summarize. You either tell the story or you just walk away, right? There's no summarizing because there's nuances in the way we speak and the way we see things. But give us a brief observation or your own take on the origins of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, what we call religions, as having borrowed from Africa. As I say that, this morning I was having a back and forth with some one Ubuntu Africans in a group where one of them claims that Islam, as I was explaining to them, Islam came to us in a violent way, did not come in a violent way. So they've accepted this thing that is foreign to us and have been sold on it so much that they don't even see the origin. So please speak to that.
Okay. Tell me what you are meaning when you say Ubuntu.
So our way of Ubuntu, and I was so happy to hear you talking. I forget what video exactly it was I was watching. But as you were explaining, you never said the word Ubuntu, but everything you said was Ubuntu. That our way, African sacred science, values life. It doesn't take life indiscriminately, right? We value life.
Right.
African sacred science, those two S's are playing with my mind right now, but sacred science does not grab land. Right? African sacred science honors nature, and it is invested in making sure that nature is thriving and is doing well. African sacred science understands cosmology, the sun, and again, our agriculture was based on that. My grandma would know when to plant things. Just a whole interaction of you, the human being, and
okay. So we're in the same space. I just want to make sure we're in exactly the same space. But let's start with Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The things that dominate our psycho-spiritual world today.
Yeah.
And if we can look around our world and say these things have value, it means the insanity that they have imposed on us is critical.
Yes.
Whoa.
It's critical. How can we look and say, oh, Congo is the wealthiest piece of real estate on the earth, but they're suffering the atrocity of genocide and the rape of our women and the murder of our children, the destruction of nature on a scale unmeasurable every day. But all of the Catholic churches and all of the Protestant churches and all of the mosques in our space, and we're participating in every day. How can this be? What is this contradiction? You know, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are mere fragments from the periphery of the African sacred science, fragments that a foreign human element to Africa put together to humanize themselves. It didn't work. They didn't become human.
Yeah.
Okay? It didn't work. Human beings don't come in and murder millions of people to take the raw material in the ground, which is free for all to use. You do not have to murder for it. Ask for some of it. You need it, you use it. But you want to murder whole populations for centuries after centuries, so you will be the only one that have access to the wealth of nature? I mean, our ancestors didn't kill you when you arrived. We welcomed you. You took the welcome and then you murdered me. And you continue to murder me.
Yeah.
And when I reject your inhuman behavior, you accuse me of being in violation of the civilization, which has nothing civil in it. Islam, and I served as an imam for many years, not because I believe, and let the whole Islamic world hear me, because anyone know me knew what I did and why I did it. I did not believe in Islam as a savior or religion or the pathway for Black people. I believed at that time it was a political tool that was useful in our fight against the oppression of white America.
Exactly.
And the mosque that I headed was called the Muslim Mosque, Inc. It was founded by Malcolm X after he left the Nation of Islam. Then I was Amin Ashahid. I went to Mecca at a very early age and made Hajj. And I had a chance to see their world. And it was not a world that we had any part in creating deliberately. It was their world. We were in it, but we were not of it.
Yeah.
They, even today in the Muslim world, the non-Africans do not think that the Africans who have become Muslim is of their world. We're just in their world.
Wow.
I hope you understand that.
Yeah.
And that is why for years, the African Muslims of Senegal did not even go to Mecca. The great singers did not sing in the East because they had been forced into Islam through wars.
Mm-hmm.
People don't understand. You want to know how Islam got into Africa? It got in there with the sword. Study the history of Ethiopia. How Ethiopia or Aksum had to fight against the invasion from Yemen and even invade Yemen to defend themselves. Study how Abu al-As, after the death of the Prophet Muhammad and under the leadership of Umar, invaded Kemet, even when Umar sent him a letter asking him not to do it in order to unseat the Roman remnants that was left. And how that same Abu al-As went across North Africa and he created a contract where he'd bring his mighty armies in, slaughtering our people, and says, okay, hey, we make a deal. You don't want me to slaughter you? You agree to say, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, that you're going to become a Muslim and that you give me a certain amount of financial tribute every month and I'll leave you alone.
Yeah.
I won't kill you. That's called armed robbery today. And so we get so engulfed in, the Moors of North Africa invaded Spain for 700 years. What is something um, magnanimous about invading another country and killing other people? What is that? What is that really about? Oh, because and we can see Black people in Europe doing European medieval time. Look at them. They're bishops. They're this. Is there something magnanimous about being traitors and about being, what's that word? We're still doing it today. We're collaborators with
Gatekeepers.
our enemy. And because it happens to be physically rewarding, we praise it as great victories.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that many of the African peoples of North Africa fought against the Umayyad Islamic empire that Abu al-As led into North Africa? They fought to their death, and only those who were conquered became those who we call Moors. We were conquered and accept the way of an enemy that we have spent hundreds of years fighting against. So did we have any choice? And after the Christians gathered themselves by 1492 and drove most of us out, we came back into North Africa, which is now dominated by the people we're calling Arabs, but they're not just Arab, they're Visigoth Germans and Romans and Greeks who occupy North Africa now as Algerians and Moroccans and Tunisians and so forth. And then they drove us out of North Africa down into Mali, into Senegal, into Niger. Don't we study history? History will erase the mystery, and you'll know how to define yourself in time and space. And that'll tell you who your relationship and what your relationship should be to people. There was a Black woman, her name was also Amanatu. She led the armies of the Moabites people fighting against the Arab Muslim invasion of North Africa. You can't call it anything other more than an invasion. We welcomed the invasion in the 800s because it was helping us to free ourselves from the Roman and the Visigoth German domination. And the reason we went into Spain, we didn't go to give them civilization. We were chasing them out of our land. And because these Arab Muslims under the Umayyad Caliphate was assisting us, we had some sort of relationship to militarily in a partnership. But we had different purposes. We were trying to take our land back, and this other group was trying to take our land from us again. We ran the Romans out. We ran the Visigoths out as rulers. We didn't run them off the land. They stayed. They lost the victory. They got defeated. But the people who we're now calling Arabs in North Africa, yes, many of them are Yemeni, and many of them came from the Arab East. But even the Arabs themselves is a mixture of the Roman and the Greeks and the Persians and the Germanic Visigoths themselves. So study history, erase this mystery of fantasy. Understand who the people you're calling Moors were. They were a part of the Umayyad Empire, who was running away from the Turkish and Kurdish invasion of the so-called Middle East and Northeast Africa. And so they ran away and took control of North Africa. And we think the partnership, and it is done in blood-soaked desert and mountains. We did not give up easy. And when we did retreat southwards, we defend ourselves. And we used their system because it was one of the best way to trade. Back, the greatest trade we had northward was across the Mediterranean. They dominated the trade space between us and that Mediterranean. Much of those wars was about them coming for natural resources. Even then, they were coming for the iron, they were coming for the copper, they were coming for the olives, they were coming for the gold, they were coming for the salt. They weren't coming to say, Salam alaikum, hello, my friend, how are you doing? You know? And so we need to return to our history. When this is occurring, which side are we on? You know, yes, we lost some of the major battles. The people they weren't called Berbers. You know, these are the Gudamas, these are the Garamantes. Learn the story of the Gudamas and the Garamantes as they defined themselves before these European mixture came to North Africa in the 8th century and the earlier centuries with the Greeks and the Romans. And begin to understand who you are. And even when we come down to the 1700s, 1500s, 1600s, and they're dealing with the great jihads of West Africa. What do you call if it's a jihad? Isn't that a war?
Yep.
So you're going to have all of these great jihads tearing up West Africa, selling us into slavery to the European. Islam was running a trans-Saharan slave system, a trans-Indian Ocean slave system for 1,500 years before 1492. When the Western Christian came and set up their trade in our bodies across the Atlantic, they were tapping into an Islamic, Arab, Turkish, European, Kurdish slave system that was 1,500 years old. So history will erase the mystery. Because we are forced to accept Christianity, does that make it ours? No. Because we were forced to accept Islam, does that make it ours? All of us didn't accept it. Go throughout Africa, East Africa, West Africa, are people who are still holding on to this history, telling the truth of how the invaders came to our land, telling the truth of how we were forced to, for survival's sake, to convert to their so-called ideologies, which became religion. None of them were religion in the beginning. Christianity wasn't a religion. Islam wasn't a religion. They were political and economic ideologies that they made into religion. Look at the history. The history is about moving from this space where their genocides was to conquering other people. We didn't invite them to come and conquer us. You know, and they weren't conquering because they wanted to teach us about God. They came for the gold. They came for the diamond. They came the same things they're coming for now. They came for the iron. They came for the copper. They came for the bronze. They came for the fruits. They came for the vegetables. They came for the salt. The same things they came for the herbs and the spices. They came for the animals and the skins and the ivory. The same things they come for now, they came for then. And they tell us they came to bring us God. How do we need to have them bring God when we are already God?
Hey.
Ooh.
Hey.
Ooh.
I do, Ndugu or Oladele, I don't know if you have a question, but you made a nod to Dr. Wade Noble's quote that our history will erase the white man's mystery. And we encounter a lot of our Oladele, I'm going to bring us back in. We don't want him small all by himself. We're in community with him. Yes. This is a mbongi. We are gathering together, learning from each other and learning from our elder. So it's important to be in community. It's important to gather together and be in conversation together.
Let me say, there's something that Ivan has put on the screen.
Ivan.
Our real knowledge of the existence of God is not obtained from the intellect. Partially, Ivan, it is obtained from the intellect. It's not obtained from the intellect, but it must be understood via your intellect. We can take up the subject of God and reason about it all our life, only to find ourselves in the end in a worse muddle than when we started. And yet one single ray of consciousness reaching down into the depths of our inner being will bring to us such a complete, where did I lose it?
Certainty
of God's existence and being, that nothing afterwards will ever shake our faith in the reality and the existence of supreme power. We will not understand the nature of his being. Stop calling, first let's stop it. Stop calling it his.
His, thank you.
Stop, and I understand you're very close to what I've been taught, and I understand, Ivan. But we've got to stop seeing the concept of God through European ideas. There's no God up there and you're down here. There's no being over there and you here. There's only one thing that exists, and we're a part of that one thing. We are a part of that being. That being don't exist without. You cannot even. There isn't there isn't a way we can conceptualize being separate from the being, because then it is not the being anymore.
Yeah.
Omnipotent, omnipresent, omnipotent, and supreme, saying that you're the only thing that can occupy all things, all space, all time. There's no room for nothing else. So then what are we? We are aspect of it. That's all that exists. It is being conscious of that has been wrecked.
Yep.
You know, our culture was wrecked. When you burn a village to the ground, when you burn a sacred grove to the ground, when you kill the elders, when you murder the class, the scientific class we call the priest class, and you do this for centuries on centuries on centuries, you destabilize the people's understanding of their reality.
Yeah.
You see, you destroy their rituals. Rituals are nothing but tools and methodologies for understanding reality and being involved in it. And you destabilize that for hundreds of years with tyranny and murder and mayhem and burning and stealing, robbing and raping. Then at the end of the day, you hand them a little packaged product and a book and say, this is the word of God. This is the way of God. You learn this thing and you will be all right. But nothing changes. Century after century after century, nothing changes for you. It only makes them more wealthy. And then we still fight to say, oh, this book, the problem was you just didn't study the book well.
Yeah.
Allegorically. You have to read it a little differently. No, you need to burn it up. Like they're doing in the Congo. Burn it. Yeah. Get it out of your physical space, then get it out of your mental space. Go back to your inner space. Somebody says that, oh, they talk about aliens. We're all aliens in that sense of being. This planet that we're on is moving in outer space like all other planets, right? We're no different in terms of our identity in time and space than Mars and Jupiter and Venus and all the others. So we need to understand, but we are they. The very light that light Mars also lights our bodies.
Yes.
Okay. The very energy that comes from the Milky Way is also absorbed by our bodies and cause us to be. We are the universe. Our ancestors understood the manner in which we are and what we call our culture, because your culture is your primary education system. And so our ancestors used our culture to explain our fundamental reality. And rituals are nothing but tools to help enforce and teach that fundamental reality of how we are part of the one, and at the same time we are the one.
Oladele.
Prof,
sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Prof, somebody just said there. What did you mean by us being God? Somebody they don't understand. If you want to talk on that.
Well, the first thing, with great love, what do you mean when you think of God?
Hey.
Yeah, good question.
What are you talking about? When I say God, what picture do you see? Is that a picture from your ancestor or a picture from your enemy? See, if I know that, then I can explain to you in a way that you would understand.
Go ahead, Nay, and put that answer in the Mwalimu Small has put out that question to you. In order for him to answer and understand where you're coming from, please put.
Yeah, and then we'll come back to responding to that.
Yeah.
Because
no problem.
You may mean fish and I may mean cattle. We need to be clear. What do you mean when you say God? When I say I'm God, I'm saying that there's only one existence in existence. And I'm a part of that existence. And any part of an existence contains the complex totality of the existence itself. When we see a light from the sun, it contains everything that is in the greater sun. It's just the microcosm of that macrocosm, you know. But it doesn't have any less because it looks tiny, you know. I look at my hand right now, you look at your hand, and we see hand. But the hand is billions of tiny little life forms called cells that's working together in the appropriate manner to make this instrument what it is. But this instrument is an illusion of being one thing. This one thing is made up of all these tiny little things. If they got confused for a minute and move apart, you would disappear.
Yeah.
Disappear. Because they're so tiny, they're invisible. But without them working, the nuclei and the proton and the neutrons and the electrons, without them working together in harmony, what we call ma'at in the universe, we disappear. We don't exist. We look like we are this amalgam, but we are an amalgam of billions of other tiny little life forms. We call them cells. You can't see them with your eyes, but they're working to make that finger a finger. You know, and they look just like the one that makes the heart, but they have different jobs. They don't confuse their place in space. Yet they work in harmony to create this body as a reflection of the totality of the universe, in which this body is an integral part.
The importance of having this mindset, of having this understanding, takes away that corrupted, and I call it criminal mindset that wants to destroy, because you realize in destroying, you're essentially destroying yourself. Again, our way of Ubuntu. In destroying the trees, you're essentially destroying yourself. In ripping the land of its resources indiscriminately without considering the effects of it, you're essentially destroying yourself. And therefore, if you're operating in that way, you have your best interest at heart, which means you have the interest of everything else at heart, if it's supporting your well-being, right? That's the importance. It's not just talk. It's not that Mwalimu Small is here preaching to us. It is essential for us to understand that, so that we can promote our well-being.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Nene has response. She says,
Yeah, you can say that. Yeah.
But I was raised with the idea of God. I've lost you. Raised with the idea of God / God as an omnipotent separate entity managing our affairs. Who raised you with that? Where did that knowledge concept come from?
Okay.
That has to be a part of our study. That's why when Dr. Robert Noble's first laid that piece out, I'm glad you raised it. I changed it formally a little bit from what Wade said. I said history will erase the mystery. There is a mystery by which we govern our life. There's a body of knowledge that informs us, that allows us to take action on a daily basis called living. Where did that body of knowledge come from? How is it that we could think that a murderer could instruct us on how to value life?
Exactly.
But someone has made us believe that's so. I watched the television, and this is not diverting, last night when I came home, or this morning, and I saw a black man saying, it's Hamas we've got to go after. It's Hamas we've got to go after. Israel have a right to defend itself. Now, Hamas, if it was Hamas, we don't know whether what happened in December or October when this happened. October, whether that was Hamas or whether that was Israeli intelligence or whether that was Mossad. To me, it looks like Mossad.
Yeah, I agree with you.
They may have even convinced some people who were Palestinian that they were Hamas. They're that good, all right, to give them the excuse to commit the genocide. Now, this poor black man with his depraved mind is sitting there saying that Israel have a right to defend itself, but not saying that that concert was taking place on seas occupied Palestinian land where the Palestinian was killed and driven off of. So the Palestinian don't have a right to defend itself. But you can come in and murder 50,000 men, women, and children, and that's called collateral damage in a war. And you're using the most sophisticated weapons America, Britain, and France have ever created in the history of the world, and you will justify that kind of genocide, that man, that mind in the body of that Black African American man is a polluted, distorted, Judeo-Christian disease consciousness. But yet it is projected as legitimate intellectual discourse, what's spewing from its mouth.
See, the irony, Mwalimu Small, as you say that, is that Black man is saying this while he resides in a land where his humanity is not seen. And it only takes one turn from agreeing with the system where he disagrees with it, and his own home, talking about his immediate home, will be invaded. He doesn't realize that he too is in the same position the Palestinians are in.
He doesn't see, and he's in a worse position than the Palestinians. At least the Palestinians know that they're in that position. So
okay.
And so I raised that, coming back to the sister's concept of where you got your God from. Who gave you that concept? We're at war. We have been at war for centuries. It is never abated. We've been at war for centuries. Since the first invasion into the space our ancestors occupied, anywhere in the world, but particularly in Northeast Africa. Right. And the invasion has never stopped. Even when they said, oh, we're signing a peace treaty. Do you think the peace treaty that the French signed with the so-called Francophone state was a peace treaty?
Never.
They never honored them.
Never.
But it was never designed to be a peace treaty. It was designed to be another way of enslaving you, but with you being your primary enslaver for their interests. Okay? And so to free ourselves, we must learn to, again, love ourselves. But we cannot truly love ourselves if we don't love the ancestors that is ourselves. And we can't learn to truly love the ancestors that is ourselves unless we understand to love the divinity that is our primary ancestry. See, if nothing exists but God, it's so simple to me the way I've learned and been taught. If nothing exists but the divine in the so-called beginning, but there can't be a beginning. There is no concept of beginning in reality because there's no concept of ending in reality. Wow. Those are false notions, Eurocentric notions. Right? But when nothing exists but God, so let's call the divine the God, that nothing exists but God, right? Who then give me existence? And if I am existing from the original existence, is it not my ancestor? My primary ancestor is God itself. And if I exist from that existence, if it brings me into being, it has to bring me into being as itself. It is the only thing that it can bring into being. You understand? I'm trying to make this so simple.
Yes.
When my mother and father gave birth to me, they gave birth to themselves. When my great four gave birth to those two, they gave birth to themselves. And the great eight gave birth to those four, they give birth to themselves. And I'm the culmination of all of them until I give birth to my children who become a further culmination of the same. That goes back to the divinity when it decided to become human as a way of expressing an aspect of itself in itself.
Wow.
And it's funny, quickly, Oladile, it's funny because it actually is in the Bible, like the false writing. They actually do let it slip in there, where they say that we have been created in the image of God. And I always use this when I speak to my family members who are still holding on to Christianity. If we are made in the image of God, why are we out here talking about you're different from me, you're different from me, you're different from me? If we are all human beings are made in the image of God. That is essentially what Mwalimu Small is talking about.
And when we refer back to the documents that have become, at the point of the sword and the gun, our primary informers. Remember, they put this document together. Then let's study the history of the document. When was the Torah written?
Oh, thank you. Take us
By
there, sir.
whom and where? And you must study that. When was the Bible written? By whom and where? When was the Quran written? By whom and where? What was the historical circumstances that gave birth to these theological phenomena, which none of them started out as religion? They all started out as political ideology
Yep.
that became religion once they had dominated, and all of them went on a killing spree. Look in the book of Genesis, then go to the book of Exodus, and these people that say we are the chosen of God is doing exactly what you see the ones who are imitating them
right
are
now.
doing
Yeah.
right now in
In
Gaza.
Israel. Yeah.
Yep.
They went into, according to their literature, which makes up your Holy Bible for those of you who are Christians, and the Quran. They say, our God told us to go into the land of Canaan, kill all the men, women, and children, only save the women that are virgins, kill their dogs and their chickens, and burn their homes. What God tells them. This is in your Bible, people. Why don't you read it? Look at the genocide that the so-called Hebrew Israelite is wreaking upon the people, the indigenous people of what we call Palestine today, which was called by another name, Canaan, in that day. They even write about the genocide and create holidays celebrating it, like Passover. What is Passover? When you come and murder the firstborn boy child of the house of the Africans of Kemet.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Passover is a murder spree, a bloodbath of genocide. And you're now celebrating it with candies and songs, and got us celebrating it with you. Celebrating your murder and genocide of the black male child to frighten us into submission so that you who had collaborated with the Hyksos can walk away with my wealth. Study history. It will erase the mystery.
As you talk about these books, a thought comes to mind, and I'll state it, and we can see where it guides you to speak on. All these books are said to have been written by men, right? We know they say apparently Muhammad was not intelligent, but he was given the power to write down or portray to someone, convey to someone what was said to him, and then other people wrote it. Same thing, but all men. And I ask myself, when I'm confronting these ideas that don't make sense to me anymore, I was born and raised, by the way, Christian. I will put that caveat there. So
really?
That, right? I was a Catholic. My first name is Joan, named after Pope Joan II.
Me
because
too.
he was in Nairobi
I
when
was a deacon in the church, Professor Small.
So I have been there. It's not like I have not been there talking about this is the best thing since sliced bread. But I had to sit back and ask myself, we have these books that are apparently guiding this
Is that your granddaughter?
of who we are that grounds us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're all written by men. And I ask myself, if we have a God in a world that has been created by a God, where this entity has clearly created a balance between feminine and masculine, why would these important words be written only by men?
Mm-hmm. Because all of these books is written by people who have conquered our land. And once they've murdered us and robbed us, remember, see, we keep forgetting, why did they come? They wanted our gold.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted our iron. They wanted our linen. They wanted our maize. They wanted our beans. They wanted our spices. They wanted our salt. You understand? They wanted our building crafts and how to build ships and boats. They came to steal something. These are robbers, thieves. And they come from murder cults. We did not live in murder cults. We valued the life of not only the human, but even the very beetle bugs that walk the earth. We did not kill except out of necessity to survive. But yet these murder cults came and killed for things, as they still do today. We call it colonialism, like it's some pretty, but colonialism is the title of murderers and thieves and rapists and genociders. That's who the colonizers are. That's not a pretty word. Colonial means genocide, you know, a brutal history of it. And so when they've conquered us, then the leaders now sitting in the joy of all the wealth they've taken, they want a way to now have some civility. The civility that they just destroyed, they now want to replicate it for themselves so that they can enjoy what they have stolen. And this is how these religions come about. They bring the best of our teachers that they haven't murdered. And so now help us write a document that will teach the masses that we've conquered to behave under our control.
Exactly.
I was going to ask. I got a question here. Somebody was asking, how do you define God without using a religious language?
How do I say it again?
How do you define God without using religious language?
I'm God having a human experience.
Hey.
You know. So what else can see? Throw out all of it. We've got to wash our brain of them.
Yeah,
we do.
What is in? I'm an evil. Say I'm an evil man. I'm a good Igbo Christian man. I'm lost. I don't care how much Igbo cloth I can wear. I don't care how much Igbo language I speak. If I'm a good Igbo Christian, I'm a dead Igbo.
Hey.
If I'm a Yoruba man and I'm going to Ile Ife and I'm pouring libations, I'm praying, but then I'm going to church on Sunday, I'm a dead Yoruba man. If I'm a Shona woman and I can go into the shrine in my backyard and talk to the ancestors, but I dust my clothes and I go to church on Sunday, I'm a dead Shona woman pretending to be alive. Give them back their stuff. I only want the stuff of my ancestors. I am my ancestors. Let me be.
Yes.
Let me be. When you become you, nobody can oppress you. Nobody can conquer you except to make you too afraid to be you. To make you afraid, they've got to tell you a story that makes you think life can end by their gun or their sword. And then they hold their gun on you and say, I will end your life unless you stop being who you are. And to want to have this artificial living, we stop being who we are. Yet not realizing I just left the funeral of my uncle, I just left the funeral of my grandma, I just left the funeral of my cousin, we all will die. So why would I let some fool with a gun frighten me that he's going to kill me in this moment or that moment when I don't know what moment I will die anywhere, whether he's there with the gun or not?
Yeah.
Wow. You know what, sir? I've got to the stage in my life right now where, like Nduku, I grew up a Christian. I was deacon in the church, and a few years back, myself and my wife, things did not make no sense. A lot of things don't make sense. And the moment we left church, I began to see things completely differently. And we're in a stage right now where we have people around. I'm asking. It's my thought anyway. Just when to speak to it, I'm telling people that all, like you said, all these what they've created, the Islam, the thing, it's basically confining us. Like you said, it's not letting us know who we are. It's taking us away. Some people are just so hell bent that they cannot see the shackles of these religions and how it's not allowing us to be who we are. And I used to be there, but as I've came out of it, I've just become freer. I could see things differently, and things are different, and I can actually, when you awaken, you can actually see things before they even happen because you basically take away from the restrictions of all these things. But Africans seem to just dig themselves in. They don't want to get out of it. How do we help people? I don't know. What will people do? Because it's basically messing Africa up, as you said.
It's fear. They frighten us into thinking we can die. I cannot die. I can only be transformed. I am matter and I'm energy. Neither can be destroyed. It is configured in this composition by nature called James Small. But it's just a configuration of matter and energy in its peculiar expression that allows me to be a temple conduit for the wisdom of the universe itself. And that wisdom of the universe is simply our ancestors' body of knowledge transferred to the next generation. When you're cut off from that ancestor's body of knowledge, you die. And we are dead now because we allowed the enemy to cut off from the ancestors' body of knowledge that explains reality and gave us these books called religion and said, this body of knowledge is going to now explain reality.
As we talk about being in the way of Ubuntu, right? Understanding nature and being in community with nature, in harmony with nature. Please, I heard you talk about this, and I want my brothers and sisters to hear you talk about this. Talk about the Happy River, otherwise known as the Nile River. Well, the invaders called it the Nile River, but we called it the Happy River, HAPI. Talk about what the Happy River is telling us and why we should listen to it.
Right. I don't know which one it is. I've given so many lectures.
It was, you were talking to, I forget what the African brother is called. He has a show, but you were essentially, I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
When we talk about the Happy River, remember it has its genesis in the southern part of Africa. And some people say, oh, it comes from the Blue Nile in Ethiopia and the White Nile in Uganda. Yes, those are some of its sources, but it also drains from all of the tributaries in the Congo. It comes from Malawi. All of these little rivers drain. See, Africa in the south is high, in the north is low. So the south is draining off after the rainy season to the lowland, which heads to the Mediterranean. And so it's the only river in the world that flows from south to north, by the way, and it is the longest river in the world, And so it brings not only with it the silt and the rotted trees and the plants that fertilize the ground, but it also brings with it the people with their ideas and concept of what living and being is all about. And the ecology that it creates when it meanders through what we now call Ethiopia, Uganda, Sudan, and Kemet or Egypt, it creates an ecology. It creates an environment that is in such extraordinary harmony and balance. It allows for nature to just express herself, And so that means now what appeared to be desert. Remember, this was desert before the river came. The waters that make up the river, most of it comes from the south, but guess what? A lot of it initially came from the west, as the west, which we now call the Sahara, which was once as fertile as the valley we call the Nile, submerged this water, which is still there. The rivers are still under that sand. Gaddafi had tapped into the aquifers, and that's how he was running the agriculture in Libya. So, but when it could no longer serve us, we moved eastwards towards the new flow coming from the south, which we call the Happy Valley, the Happy River. And it created an environment that allowed for plants to grow in abundance. It created an environment that allowed for animals to thrive in abundance. It created an environment that allowed for fish to live in abundance. So it created an environment that allowed for the man and the woman to live off of nature in abundance. And so we were able to build that extraordinary civilization, which was really just about explaining ourselves to ourselves. Let me say that again. explaining ourselves to ourselves. That's what our civilization was. We didn't build the buildings to stand and look at them. We didn't build those things we call temples. We never call any of them temples anyway. These were what we call universities today, places of learning about the universe and about nature and about the human's role in the universe and nature, cosmology, ecology, and the human being and all of its participants, the worms, the bugs, the snakes, the birds, okay, the buffalo, the lion, the leopard. Everybody's participating in this together with respect for one another. With the respect for one another. The happy river gave us the abundance that allowed us to create this harmony. So we're able to say, oh, the fisherman, he's fishing. And so we need someone who would make boats for the fishing. The person who's planting and the one who's making the linen cloth needs someone to find the tools so he can break the ground. Or we need a science called geometry so we can measure the land that each one is using without having conflict with the other use of the land. Or we need to understand trigonometry because things are falling from trees and we need to understand what is that all about. So we need to measure this. So this thing we call civilization evolves out of us having this harmonious phenomena that's called Nile Valley civilization or the Kemetic civilization that now the invaders' children live in and call Egypt and says, oh, all of this is ours. We created all of this. Yet they can't find themselves in any of the images. All of the images of Black African people. And they bring the world there to see it every day and make $1 trillion a year off of it. And then tell us, that's me. Oh, yes, my lips are thick there. And my nose is broad there. My hair is short and curly there. But don't confuse things. That's really still me. Despite me being wet, narrow features and white and straight hair, what you're seeing, oh, that black mummy, oh, he's black because time turned his skin black. It's not melanin at all. Even though Shekanta Diop has tested it and proved that the melanin cluster determines it to be the deepest African of Africans. And so this foolish, empty-minded person who pray 5 times a day, who go to the Coptic church every day, who go to the synagogue or temple every day, and pray to these great gods would come and tell this great lie just about their false identity with the picture of the African in front of them, pretending that the mirror don't reflect what it sees. And then some of us buy into it because we're afraid. I am not afraid to be my mother. She's right here. See them over there. All of those people there who once lived in those bodies. They go with me everywhere I go in the world. I move with a mighty army everywhere I go. They make me up. And people say, well, do they make up your brother and sister? They're with you or they're with your brother and sister? Of course they are. We all have aspects of their being, just like we are aspect of the greater being. It is one law, one rule.
You know what, Professor Small? Something you said there, and this is something I've been guilty of. My dad passed away about over 30 years ago now. I was in my teens. And as a Christian, they make you believe that once your parents have passed away, they passed away, and that's it. And as I've grown older, and I actually regret some of the decisions I've made in the past, because basically once you bury your parents, you talk to forget about it. And as I'm waking up now and as I hear you speaking, I've made decisions in the past where I don't even want to associate myself with my dad that's passed away. But as I've gone older, I'm thinking, because that's the indoctrination I had. But as I've gone older now, I'm thinking, what a massive mistake I've made in the past. Because like you just said there, I am my ancestor.
Your dad created himself as yourself while he was still his self. He can't pass away because you are him.
Yes.
Where's he gonna pass it? You are him. And he gave you the best aspect of himself. When we have babies, and while I was in Trinidad, I was with my goddaughter, who's also now my godmother. right?
Mm.
Because her mom has passed, who was my teacher. And
Mm.
now the one who was my goddaughter is now my teacher.
Mhm.
And she just had twins, a boy and a girl.
Mm.
And I'm looking at them and realizing, oh, I'm looking at Omi holding her babies and realize those babies is Omi.
Yeah.
She's holding herself.
Mm.
And then men and women have to realize the only way human beings is created is through you having sex.
Mm.
The white man has taken sex and so violated it,
Thank
so
you.
Oh,
profaned it,
they
Talk.
sodomize it.
you know, and that we don't understand that the way the divine creates, we are that aspect of the divine that creates.
Mm.
No babies drop out of the sky.
Mm-mm.
They
No
don't go up
stop.
in the ground in a field and you go pick them in a basket. We are that aspect of God, if you want to use
Mm.
that word, or that aspect of the divine that
Mm.
creates. You understand?
Yeah.
Yes.
It can't create without us. That's why this thing called love, and the European calls sex love. Sex is not love.
Mm-mm.
It is something those who understand truly what love is should do. But
Mm.
anybody now does it. You can hate the person you're mating with, but for the pleasure of the mating, you do it, even if you have to rape to do it. How
Talk
can
about
you then
yeah.
produce a life that is pure out of the violence of rape? How can you produce a life that is normal out of even the violence of being ignorant of why you're even having an intercourse?
Mm.
In the moment of intercourse, when you move to the place of creating life,
Mm-hmm.
you are the epitome of the divine.
Mm.
You're the creator in the act of creation itself. And he's so defamed that process
Mm.
that we don't hold sacred anymore the womb of the woman
Mm.
or the organ that penetrates it of the man. They're not
Mm.
Mm.
sacred
Mm.
anymore because we
Mm.
don't understand who we
Wow.
are. You know?
Oh.
The other one for me was you talking about the African identity. You were talking about Kamala Harris, which was funny, but what
Yeah.
you said was profound, and we all need it. So I'll quote you, and then you can talk about it.
Mhm.
The African identity is more than a label. It is a value system. It is a worldview. It is a way of life. It is the way we carry out intergenerational transmission of our ancestral wisdom to our children. You can't just put it on as a label and say, I am Black or African American or African. You have to have an understanding of history. You have to have an understanding of our culture. You have to develop a worldview that reflects African integrity based on African histology. Please talk
I
about it.
said all of that.
Yes, you did.
Yes.
You're a
Yes, you
brilliant
did.
Malimo.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Your ancestors are represented in you.
Who was it? Dr. Asa Hilliard, one of
Mhm.
my teachers. Anything Dr. Hilliard have written, Dr. Asa Hilliard, please read that mind. You remember these documents are simply the expression of the mind that wrote the documents. And he said, true freedom. Freedom is a Greek word, liberated mind. Free to liberate, dome the mind. True liberated mind is to be shackled to your identity.
Say that.
Ooh.
A true liberated mind is to be shackled not partially to your identity and partially to your enemy's identity, but to be shackled to your ancestral identity. To be shackled is to be coupled to something that you can't break away from.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember when he was leaving, and I said, Bubba, what's the matter? He looked healthy. We were doing a lecture in St. Louis, teaching some teachers. And he came over to me and he smiled. He said, Brother Small, we're just spirits in transition. And then he walked away. 2 weeks later, he was gone.
He had transitioned.
Yes. We're just spirits in transition. So when you are shackled to your identity and you study that identity, your identity is the teachings and the resulting behavior of your ancestry. So let me try to put it in a simple scenario. We've got an enslaver with a gun. You have an enslaved person who is not harming anyone and is being taken advantage of by this one with a gun. The one who's being taken advantage of is your ancestor. The one who's taken advantage is the enemy of that ancestor. Which one thoughts are you to possess? You possess the thoughts of the one with the gun who's stealing from your mother and your father, or you possess the thought of your mother and father as they're trying to reckon and analyze why this one with the gun is stealing from them. Which side of that scenario, spiritually and intellectually, are you going to be on? If you're going to reflect the truth of nature, you've got to be in the consciousness of your ancestors, who is responding to this thing in nature that is deprivating, right? But instead, we have been taught through fear to be on the side of the one holding the gun.
Imagine that.
Rather on the side of the one for whom the gun is being held. And I call that post-slavery trauma syndrome. Post mean after. Slavery mean the violent process of genocide we were engaged in by them. The trauma is the resulting damage, and the syndrome means it continues in our psyche. Even today, we're still on the plantation. We're still being raped. We're still being murdered. And how are we doing it? We are now doing it to ourselves, not realizing we have become the one with the gun and not the one with whom the gun was being held.
And abandoned our ancestors, left them in the Mafa without...
because the ignorance that came from the fear don't allow us to see that we were the ones being murdered. We are not the murderer. But now we think that we are the murderer in our subconscious. So we murder ourselves in the name of Judaism, in the name of Christianity, in the name of Islam. It's just, let's just take something as simple as the burqa, the dress of the woman. I was in Mecca in 74. And I saw a scene in front of the Kaaba, in front of Baitul Allah, the mosque. A bunch of women who was covered, being beaten by a man, a white man, an Arab man, with a stick.
When
and
was
they
this?
were sounding like puppy dogs. They were going, and he was beating them. And I went and took the stick and I beat the hell out of him. They only were asking for water. They wanted some water to drink. And the soldiers came to accost me. But when they heard me speak and they realized I was an American, they backed up. And they wanted to know what was going on. And I said, he was beating the women. They only, and he was angry. Oh, he was Syrian. He was fuming with me. And this is in Mecca.
Imagine that.
And these women only wanted water. Enough for them to sit in that heat covered in all that black cloth. And you couldn't give them water. You tell me about Islam. Are you insane? Why? When I first went to Togo, and I went to, it's 1983. It is on my birthday. I'm with my teacher, Dr. Leonard Jeffries. And we went up in the farming cocoa area. And I saw, when I got out of the van, all I saw is these women covered from the waist down and all of these breasts. And oh my God, with my American mind, you know what I said? Oh, my head is going like this. I don't want to. I can't look. How am how am I to look at these women's breasts? I didn't know how to do it.
Because you've been cultured in this Western society.
And everybody's just going about their business like nothing is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And one older sister came to me and says, I understand, son, just calm down. And then I began to see the normalcy of humanity. No one raped the women in that village.
Yay.
That's how we used to live.
No one defiled them because the mammary gland by which they were feeding that baby they carried on their back was being seen in all of its magnificence.
Wow.
No one thought she was a whore or a harlot or unworthy of being a mother. She was a goddess. She was a mother. And that baby that she carried into the fields with her that was on her back, when he got hungry, she gave him that breast. And he fed himself, or she fed himself, and she went on to work. And so later on that day, after I got some kind of control and managed,
after you were grounded in your
yes, someone said to someone that it's Professor Small's birthday. And so there's one little brother, he had one little drum, he starts playing under this tree. And I remember from home in our village, there was the big tree that we did everything under that tree, everything. And every village I went into Africa, there's that tree. And so he's playing the drum for my birthday. And so one young lady with the baby started dancing. And so I started dancing with her around the tree. And another young lady came with this baby. This baby was just crying, crying, crying. So I went and said, could I have the baby? When I took the baby up against me, the baby stopped crying. And everybody was happy. Before I know it, it wasn't 3 of us dancing anymore. It was about 50 of us dancing.
Wow. Yeah.
But then, and I'm still, I'm comfortable seeing all these young breasts bouncing up and down. And then the ones who were dancing were beautiful. But then the elders, the flat breasts, the wrinkled breasts, they started dancing. And it was magnificent to watch the feet work, to watch the rhythm with which these women, 80 and 90 years old, and then to my psyche, seeing them just essentially beautiful as those young ones with those babies.
Yeah.
That's when I became awoke in that airway village that day to a sense of humanity and an understanding of femininity that is lost for most of the rest of the world. That is lost. And that I came out of that backwards world with my backwards ideas and found myself trapped in a world that was free. That was free. And so that day in Mecca, when I was helping those women and the man went berserk and the soldiers came. And when I explained, the soldiers did side with me and made them give the women the water. And I'm saying, how could this happen in Mecca at the very gates of the Kaaba itself? And why are these women covered in all head to toe in all this black cloth? Okay. And yet this is happening before I go to Togo. So when I had the encounter in the village in Togo with the women with their breasts shown, and I thought back at that day in Mecca, with these women covered from head to toe, because the man have not had the courage or the tenacity to train his own animalism. That you're going to cover your woman and oppress your woman so that because your religion have not made you into anything human enough to protect her.
Wow, that is big.
That is essentially what it is.
It's essentially what it is.
Yes.
You're a rapist So you hide her so you won't be stimulated to rape her?
Imagine that.
Let's not continue to lie to ourselves about what we're seeing with our eyes. A woman should walk around with not a stitch of clothes on if the environment and ecology calls for that, and no one should dare violate her, not even in thought.
That's a challenge.
It is the challenge of what true civilization is, and Africa practiced that. That is the practice of Africa that was disrupted.
Wow.
The true civilization. And you're going to tell me that you covering the woman's face and your religion said you got to cover her ornaments, and you walk around wearing short pants and no shirt on.
Can you say it?
Do this to the woman. And then tell me a religion, and I go like, nah, I find that's unacceptable to me. I can't. That's not logic. That's not reasoning. That's not even sanity. You know. And when your women come to places like America and other parts of Africa, and they're able to escape, they go to the extremes. Because of escape and oppression. That is beyond sanity. It's beyond reality. And you tell me religion dictates this to me. You told me doing Christianity that the religion dictates that you carried out the genocide that you did in Spain after you pushed the Moors and the Arabs out. You said your religion told you to kill all those people. You said your religion told you to come to my land and steal me and enslave me. You said your religion told you to kill millions upon millions of Native Americans to take their land and their wealth from them. You said your religion and your God did. Your Vatican is full with my artifacts, with the trillions of dollars of my wealth in gold and silver and diamonds and rubies and other things you've stolen. My literature is there, and when you say I didn't even write, and yet I go to your Vatican and there's all my literature that you've stolen when you burned my universities and burned my libraries. You know, we have to be honest with ourselves. Study history. Erase this foolish little childish mystery. You're dealing with an immature child in nature that operates only from the stimulus that stimulate his libido, not his mind. You can stimulate him with a glass of wine, and he will kill with a few glasses of wine in his mind. You can stimulate him with the woman's body. He doesn't see it as sacred. He sees it as something to violate for his instant pleasure.
Exactly.
And his culture is built on that, while he's holding the same book in your hand, telling you to read with his gun or sword in the other hand, is that if you don't read it, submit to, I will shoot you. I will chop your head.
People need to be delivered.
You don't see it. See what you see.
I was going to say you're segueing greatly to this next question, but before I ask that, I'm going to make an observation in a description of the picture you just painted, where in Togo, the elder women, their breasts are flat from age, taking a toll on the weight and the gravity, right? And the younger ones, their breasts are still perky, but you seeing beauty in both of them. We are now a society that's infested with a need for plastic surgery and a need to not embrace the natural order of nature. And I saw this the other day, and I'm glad I'm going to mention it in this space and give my sister, Serena William, grace and hope that she understands that my saying this is not to criticize her and not understand the pain that she's going to that has led her to do this. But she had an image of her plastic surgery, and another Black woman was praising it. And to me, the concern I have is in doing that. I understand what has pushed our sister to that place, because she is in an environment that has completely traumatized her way of thinking and has her believing that you have to be look a certain way to be accepted, right? And we have to talk about that trauma, and we need a process of getting us out of it so that we can go back to accepting ourselves. But in that video, And in this other African woman praising that practice that is already harmful to community, this message is being sent out to our young women, our young girls, that the blonde hair against her black skin is beautiful. The rosy cheeks against her black skin is beautiful. When in essence, what she's doing is rejecting who she is.
Yes.
Talk about that quickly, and then we'll talk about civilization.
Well, that's a big part of the dominance, the fear of a black person loving blackness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that fear. And it goes back to ancestors. Because if you hate what you see in the mirror, you hate what produced what's in the mirror. Where did that hate come from? So when we were conquered physically by these demon rats from the West, I don't want to call them colonizers. That's too pretty a word. They're demon rats. They're genociders. When we were physically conquered, when they'd burned our sacred groves, when they'd sacked our temples, when they'd raped our women, when they'd burned our villages to the ground, then they sought to cut off our information to our history. So they steal all of our artifacts of our history and culture and cart them off to Europe and put it in their museums and their vaults and tell us we had no history worth listening to. So now you take our history, and our history says our woman is beautiful, your woman is ugly. Our man is handsome, your man is ugly. Our lips is beautiful, your lips is distorted. Our hair is pretty, your hair is nappy. And these became, it seems so simple, but this became the everyday tutelage of a population under physical duress by a murderer and a thief and a rapist of your mothers and your fathers. But you don't want to, you say, oh, let's forget the past. You can't forget the past because you are the result of the past. If you don't understand that you are the result of that past, and you won't understand unless you know that past. And if you know that past, you will know your role in that past and the role of that thing which you imitate in that past. That's why they try to do that mystery that I say the history will erase the mystery. You know, when I see you, I see my mother. I see my sister. I see my grandmother. I see my auntie. That's why in the African language, any one of the language, if the woman is old enough to be your mother, but not your mother, that's your auntie.
Or mama.
Yes, or mama. The same thing. Auntie and mama is the same. See, there's a clarity there. What that means is that your sanctity and your sacredness is worthy of respect just as my mother. And I should treat you that way. But now we have a culture that only see your buttocks, only see your breasts, only see your lips, and they've made breasts, buttocks, lips, and face, and whatever aesthetics they put on it.
Tell me about it.
The essence of attraction towards having sex.
Hey, and that is the goal.
The goal is to abuse the sacred space.
Yes.
That is the, how do you say? That is the temple or the sanctuary of creation itself. You abuse, and even I, as a young man, like all the rest of us in my ignorance, abuse it too. I just want to get some. You know, I'm gonna get this woman. I'm gonna dress tonight. I'm gonna put on my special clothes. I'm gonna dance like a crazy man. Because at the end of this dance tonight, I'm taking her home with me. Not home to sit down and have tea, but the home to lay in my bed so I can abuse her and call that abuse making love. And if in the abuse I produce children I can't even take care of because I'm not old enough, I don't have the wealth enough, so be it. I go on to look for the next one tomorrow night at the next party, at the next dance. And we think that is culturally solvent, but that is the culture that the demon rat has led us into.
Yep. So we are.
And I remember when I tried to get out of that, when I tried to come up out of that, I was about 23. And I'm thinking about this when I'm young, because I'm trying to get out of being lost.
Mm-hmm.
And I met the woman that would become my wife. We've been married 52 years now.
Wow.
And I remember I decided I will not have sex with her. I went with her for a year, the prettiest creature on God's earth, and I did not have sex with her. And I knew how to have sex already. I was 20-something years old. But the relationships I'd had all ended in destruction. And I decided that this thing of sexing each other, that we falsely call love because the enemy call it love making, abusing each other, making choices to cross in such a sacred space and you don't even know each other. You don't even know if this is the suitable mate for you to continue into a future to build a family with. You haven't even questioned the quality and attributes of yourself, let alone the quality and attributes of the person that you're now mating with. You understand what I'm saying? And so this social ecology that they've created for us is a genocidal menagerie of the human spirit itself. And it murders us at the core of our being. That space where we carry out that aspect of God that creates and replicates the divine itself. So we murder it in the name of sex and love. Without even caring, we walk off the next day and look for another one to murder and satisfy our animal desires that have been put into us through all of the socialization processes that have been put on us in this so-called education and cultural system. From the music to the dance to the paint, to the whatever. And that's still what's going on the youngsters today, who would mutilate themselves through plastic surgery to look like the murderers of their mind, the rapists of their mothers and their fathers. Who would do that except a deaf, blind, and dumb? So we can't blame them. Our job then is to come up with the science to re-enlighten them. And that's hard work.
Yeah.
But at the basis of that science is the basic history of the people's experience that have led us to this point. Somebody came into our land with a gun. Somebody came into our land with a sword. Somebody raided our village and burnt it to the ground. Somebody killed our grandparents. Somebody raped our mothers. Somebody slaughtered our fathers. That's real.
Yeah.
That must be in your soul. It doesn't mean because I was lost and blind and doing the same harmful thing that other men did in my youth. Even I deliberately, my Christianity didn't let me stay a virgin until I was 18 deliberately. And then I went into their world when I went into the military and got involved with a prostitute. That's how, and then when you get out of that, you want to bring that same deadly ignorance to your social environment. But thank God I had the foundation, the African foundation, that at age 24, I said, I don't want to do this. I want something better and different. And so I began to study Africa and follow Dr. Clark and follow Dr. Ben and follow Dr. Jeffries and follow Sheikh Anta Diop and follow Chinua Achebe. And I began to read and I began to see another African world, And I wanted to be that thing. Even if I was alone, I was better alone. I'd come into the parties after that when I come to say, oh, here comes James with all that black stuff. And then I grew my locks. I thought, okay, I'm going to get even blacker in the very early days.
I have not seen evidence of that. I'm going to look for that.
I've seen it actually. I was looking at your website. I've seen that. I actually seen that.
You saw the locks?
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it when I was doing some research.
In those times, you're in a very lonely space.
It is.
That's when I started searching for the divine, because I would rather be in that lonely space. But I was blessed in ways that others wasn't, because my grandma was a priestess and my mother was my greatest supporter. When I became the imam of my mother walked out of her church and became my cook. They said, they're not going to kill my child. They're not going to poison my baby. I will cook all your meals for you. You won't get assassinated.
Yeah.
My big brother came and became my guardian. Anybody got close to me that was threatening had to deal with some forces. That was my blood.
Yep.
You know, everybody didn't have that kind of support from their family. I was blessed to have that kind of support. And it helped me to want to just grow and learn. But the one thing to brothers and sisters, when you're trying to find your way back home, it's a lonely space.
Really?
But in that loneliness, yes, in that loneliness, you will find the divine in you.
Oh, yes.
And it's not lonely anymore.
Yes, I agree.
You
Definitely.
will find a way to understand how you and your ancestor is the same being.
Yeah.
And then you'll be able to talk to your great mother and your great father and your grandpeople and your uncle, and you'll be able to seek advice. And at first it will seem a little bit crazy talking to that which your enemy has told you were dead, until they start talking back to you in your mind and in your spirit. And you say, oh my God, they were never ever dead. They were always with me, but I wasn't with them.
Yeah.
And then you know what true freedom is. When you're shackled to your identity, because your ancestors is your identity.
Wow. You're speaking to my heart, sir. You are speaking to my heart. You are.
Oladele, we are at almost 1:40, but this one, we need to talk about this one before we go. And
Are you still okay for time, sir? Are you okay for time?
Huh?
Are you okay for time?
Oh no, I'm good. I came back from another country to do this show.
Thank you.
I was on the plane. I arrived at Kennedy Airport this morning at 5:30.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir. Okay, Undiku, go ahead.
So you talk about, and this question, the reason I bring this question is so that we can reclaim who we are, re-embrace our pride in who we are. Kujivunia, we say in Kiswahili, ninajivunia ubuntu wangu, my ubuntu way, so that we can stop looking for a civilization outside of our real civilization. So you talk about civilization and you say that there's no such thing as Western civilization. There is no European civilization. And you break it down. I can repeat what you say, but I'd rather you talk about it again now. So talk about the idea of civilization. What is it to be civilized, so that we understand who is and who isn't?
Right. When we look through the world, I tell people, go anywhere in Europe and find me a civilization. I'll sit here and I'll wait for you to come back. Go anywhere. And the closest you will get, and that's not even close, is the Greek and the Romans. And those are murder cults. They're murdering people and taking their wealth from the very inception of their history. They build nothing except what they steal from others to fortify themselves after the theft. Their people, even their gods, the children are raping their mother. The gods. In the pantheon of gods, the son rapes the mother and murders the father. How is that civilized when your God is a rapist and a murderer of his own mother? Hello? And they have us somehow buying this thing. It's total insanity. You leave the borders of where you live with all of the, and you leave the symbols of it, your armaments, your swords, and your army, and you come to people who are just farmers and fishermen and builders of true civilization through ideas, concepts, and principles based on truth, justice, harmony, balance, and reciprocity. And you come and slaughter them. and then try to take their identity after they're dead in order to identify yourself with what they had built.
Mm.
And that's how their documents we call holy books come about, trying to codify fragments from the periphery of the very civilization they've just destroyed in order to empower themselves now. So the next barbarian would not slaughter them without a fight, to take what they have taken from the innocents. There is no civilization anywhere in Europe. There isn't even a literature in Europe that's ancient. Show me one. They saw Homer and the Odyssey and the Iliad, a book which I read at age 15. In his Odyssey and Iliad, he said all of the gods of Greece must travel to Ethiopia to renew themselves in every season. Or he said, you want to say Herodotus, the father of their history. He writes a whole book too that tells you about the superiority of Ethiopia. Mm-hmm. And that even the oracles that started the modern religion for their time in Greece were two black women. He called them blackbirds. Two African priestesses that taught them the oracle, that what became the oracles of Greece. In his literature, Plato, they like to say, oh, Plato didn't write anything because they don't want you to see what he wrote, right? They said Aristotle wrote about Plato in the Republic. But no, Plato wrote before Aristotle, and it's called the Phaedrus or the Phaedra. And in the Phaedrus, Plato says that the Ethiopian gave the world all of its sciences. This is Plato, the big man. Then he lists the sciences, right? And he says medicine. He says astronomy. He says astrology. He goes and names all the science of that day. And then he said, but the greatest science of all that the Ethiopian gave to the world is the science of writing itself. This is Plato. This is their main man. Every single one of their great ones acknowledged Africa as the genesis of the only civilization they knew. They know all of this in Oxford. Yeah. They know this in Harvard and Princeton. So their greatest institutions are bastions of lies.
Wow.
The greatest institutions they've built to try and mimic the temples in Kemet are bastions of lies. Yeah. For the sake of robbing the Africans of the wealth in the ground, they tried to destroy the wealth in our very souls by taking away our identity and our sense of our own history, because it is your history that allows you to establish your identity in fact, right? So if I take away access to your history, I've taken away the tools you use to build your identity. And if I take away the tools for you to build your identity, I've taken away your ways of developing your spirituality, your understanding of nature, cosmology, and ecology, and thus I can control your behavior to my end. And then I give you the documents that will seal that control, and they're called my holy books. The only thing holy about it is that I'm wholly in control of your mind now, and you no longer are.
Wow. Okay, sir. I want to ask you this question because a lot of people are asking, watching, and we're about decolonizing the mind and awakening people's consciousness. So after everything you've taught us today, because I've learned a lot from what you said today, and I've learned so many things, and there's so many points you've raised. How do we get our originality back after the bastardization that we've gone through?
Studying.
Because we've been so bastardized that we don't even know who we are anymore. How do we get back to our
studying your history? The African authors, from Chinua Achebe to Cheikh Anta Diop to John Henry Clark to Francis Welsing, they're telling us those spirits, we're not the only spirits that have seen enlightenment. There are other spirits that come constantly. Ancestors have come back trying to show us a pathway back home. Study the resistance movement in Zululand. Ask yourself, I love to talk about Bambata, right? And Sechuaya, right? These are Zulu kings after Shaka, right? And there's the battle of, I think it's called Islambada, which is one of my favorite battles because it brings down the Robespierre government in England, right? Where two of the wives of this young king, who was having some trouble with their husband, ran to this British military camp. The British was just trying to move into Natal, right? So the king goes to the British and says, "Oh, give me my woman." And the arrogant white man says, "No, we're giving them protection." He said, "These are my wives. Give me my woman." They wouldn't, so he killed all of them and took his woman. Is that not what a man should do? So now the British sends a bigger brigade with a general, and they go to, I think, Sechuaya, the great king, and says, "You must turn that king over to us to be tried for murder." And Sechuaya said, "No, this is our land, our law. You violated our law." He sought reciprocity against your violation. You can't test. So the British attacked Sechuaya. And in one battle, in one day, he killed 2,000 of them with their guns, and we had our swords and spears. So when the word got back to London, the people went crazy. And they sacked the government. That was the government of Robespierre. Do we know that history?
No.
You know?
No.
Does that not lift your spirits?
Not widely, yes.
Yes, of course it does.
When you
more than talking about World War II, the U.S. Civil War.
Do you know Muhammad Ahmed, right, of the Sudan, 1885, 86, 87. They call him the Mahdi. He decided that the Berlin Conference has just ended. The Brits signing with the Turks and the Kurds who are now taken over Kemet. They call themselves Arabs, but and the Eastern European Serbs. That's who run Egypt today and call themselves Arabs. But then they were clearly allies and collaborators with the British. And so after the Berlin Conference, the British wanted to seize an island in the Nile called Fasada. There's a book written about it, The Battle of Fasada. If you could seize Fasada, you could control the Nile. But they had to take Khartoum, had to take Sudan. So they send the greatest general they had in Africa at that time. He was the most popular man in England. His name was Gordon. And they sent him with 23,000 men up against the Sudanese army, led by Muhammad Ahmed. Ahmed sent them back up to Cairo with 3,000 men and Gordon's head on a plate.
Wow.
The British went crazy. So they went to China and got the big general called Kitchener and brought him to Africa with the British army and the Turkish army, and then collaborated with the French, who had now seized many of our people in Senegal and that area, to attack the Sudan. We need to know these stories.
No.
And so they couldn't defeat Ahmed, so they got a collaborator, a traitor to poison him. Then Abdallah, black as night, bald like me, became the leader. But they were able to assassinate Abdallah as well. And one of the things, and I know sometimes people say you shouldn't say that, but if the army of Menelik had held up the Eastern Front, we would have defeated the Brits in Sudan, and the colonialism would have ended right there. Because the French came at us from the west, the Brits and the Turks and the Serbs from the north. And we needed to have our flank on the east. But because the Brits had helped to finance the Ethiopian throne against the Italians, the Ethiopians felt an obligation not to go against the Brits, and we lost the Battle of Sudan. History will inform you in a way that you can understand how we got in this situation, and you can begin to design how we will get out of this situation. And there's not a shortage of African literature on this. We need to stop pretending, oh, we don't have it. We have thousands of books by African men and women that we need to turn now and begin to study.
Yeah.
You know, to have a better understanding of what has occurred in Africa. They didn't just come. I saw the movie Netflix. It's called Woman King. Have you ever watched it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
it's Zinga, right?
Yeah.
So you know that it was played down.
Yes.
But it has won. It's now in the top 10 for an Emmy. Thank God, because it deserved it. It's well done. And one of my goddaughters, who was one of the writers, and I won't call her name because she's into politics, and she lives in the UK, but she's an extraordinary writer and an extraordinary diplomat too, because she is a diplomat. That's why I won't call her name. But she told me yesterday, she says, you know that all of the people behind the cameras in that film were Black women.
Hey.
That's why the film resonates in ways you don't usually see. I've watched it 4 or 5 times, and I still love it. Right? But the one that was Cleopatra, which was more of the white creation, even though it also was Sister Smith's product too, that took all the attention away from Nzinga. But yet Nzinga was the greater African presentation, presented that by Africans and mostly African women. We're talking about an African woman king who reigned for 15 years.
Yeah.
You know. And another one of my goddaughters, I got a lot of children.
You do.
And you see her in the film. She's Queen Diambi, the king of the Congo.
Okay. All right. Okay.
All right. That's my daughter. And I introduced them to that project. And so yesterday I spoke to her too from Trinidad to congratulate her. When you watch those kinds of presentations that Black people present, that they don't want in the marketplace, you begin to see the power we have to tell our own story in a way that story affects the mind of our people in a positive way.
Yes.
Even the story of Cleopatra won more awards in Europe. It just blew it away. Now, most people don't realize this is also, even though it had more of a white leaning in terms of some of the producers and other stuff and people behind the camera, this was Miss Smith, Will Smith's wife. This is her project also. Okay. And Cleopatra was not white. First of all, Cleopatra is not the name of a person, it's a title. Okay. There were 13 or more Cleopatras. I think they were talking about Cleopatra the 3rd or Cleopatra the 13th or something, or Cleopatra the 12th in this film. By then...
Is it like saying Pharaoh?
Yes, like saying Pharaoh, and thinking we're talking about one person, you know? And so the Greeks who came there under the Ptolemies, they were not the dominant population. The African was the dominant population. They merged into our population and they became Black. We didn't go to Greece. They didn't keep replenish themselves from Greece. They married into us.
Yeah, they came down. Yeah.
Okay. So there was no way Cleopatra could have still been a white woman all of those generations later married into Blackness. They know that.
Yep.
But a woman so powerful that she is really the cause for the death of Julius Caesar, which Shakespeare don't explain in his writing. But now we are questioning whether he wrote any of it at all, because now they found out
I came across that. I was actually doing some research on that.
That Shakespeare has been taking credit for.
Yeah, a Black woman is actually writing the work.
Yes.
Yeah. I found that out.
So that's why we have to study history to get rid of this demon rats mystery and to restore some African integrity to the body of information that we're looking at, you know. And then we'll begin to understand how to free our minds with truth. Our truth, though. I don't want to be the person with the whip. I want to be the body being whipped, because that's who I am. I'm the one they were whipping. I'm not the one doing the whipping. They call that the not the health thing. What kind of syndrome they call that? They use a Scandinavian name to talk about It's something syndrome, but it's when it was about prisoners of war,
Stockholm syndrome.
Stockholm syndrome,
Stockholm,
and
okay.
it's where those who receiving the pain, in order to mitigate the pain, begin to identify themselves as the pain giver rather than the pain receiver.
We seek master. We seek master. I had that one.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're doing.
Yep.
All over the African world. We're identifying as though we are the pain giver when truly we are the pain receiver. So
Yep.
now we become the greatest giver of the pain to ourselves.
Yeah. Sir, we need to be delivered. How do African minds? How can we deliver our minds from all this Stockholm syndrome?
Studying, it is so simple. It frightens
Study
people.
history.
They say it can't be
Okay.
that simple. Small.
Yeah, study history, guys.
Studying history is listening to your ancestry. That's all.
That is
Yes.
how I honestly. This is how I when I started. So
Thank you,
my
John.
journey is with Mwalimu Kimathi, Dr. Greg Carr. I started listening to him, and we'd have sessions with him in community. And when I started reading the books that he would recommend and started doing more research myself into our history, and one book led to another, you know, we go down the rabbit holes. That is when I started getting clarity. It is through the reading that I got clarity.
Yeah, because remember the literature that our ancestors are writing for us, that's their mind. That's them interpreting the reality they're facing. And they try to minimize our writers. And how do you minimize a Shekantadea?
Oh, you can't.
How do you minimize a
No matter how much you try, you're not.
of anthropology, archaeology, physics, and science, who has written so many books? You know, Civilization and Barbarism is this classic final piece. But the cultural unity of Africa is what I always recommend up front of Antadea's books, you know. And things fall apart with Cinnamon Chebe.
Oh yeah, one of my favorites.
Of colonialism on the human mind, on the African mind.
Yeah.
But you also see the African resistance, the resisting the effect of colonialism and begin to break it down.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah.
There's a quick one, and this is the last one, and then we go because now we are at 2 hours. There's a quick one.
Yeah, we need to go.
Now I have to go back up because people put in some comments after it. Regarding the woman king, that men. I saw this one and I wanted to let it go, but I didn't want to let it go because it's part of the divisive tactics that are used against us.
Yeah, I'm showing it now. I'm showing it now.
Thank you. Yes, that one.
A Woman King, I love that movie.
But look at what it says, Mwalimu Small.
Yes. But we got to see all that is said. See, I think black men got too carried away with that little bitty piece.
Thank you.
Okay. Because those women it wasn't a separate woman army. Women was in the army of the Home. The Home wasn't always a kingdom involved in enslaved trades. Matter of fact, the Home gets into the slave trade as a defense mechanism of his own people being enslaved by another element of the Oya Empire. So that's why, again, study the history so we don't get caught up in the game. It wasn't a putting down. Even that movie didn't put the men down. Nope. Even in the movie, the men were fighting right beside the women. The men were training the women. That king it was the king, the man who handed the scepter to the king, to the woman king. And what I learned from my daughter and now also my teacher, King Diambi, she's queen of the Luba, but she's king of the Congo. Even now, she sits on the throne of Nzanga, Diambi, right now. And what she explained to me, she said, Baba, in Africa, the woman is the power, but she gives to man the authority. The woman is the power, but she gives to man the authority.
Yes.
He goes, wow. Now I understand the statue of Isis sitting with Horus in her lap.
Yeah.
She is the throne. She has the stool on her head telling you she's the throne. Her body is shaped as the throne. She's the power, but she is given to her son the authority to rule,
Mm-hmm.
the power of which she presides. So when we understand our culture and our roles in our culture, things make sense. The Woman King, I thought, was a beautiful story. Yes, I work in the movie industry, right? You know, I'm a consultant for The Godfather of Harlem. This is our 4th year. I work for ABC Signature. And what's the other company? I forget that they don't get mad at me because they just sent me a new contract, which I'm going to reject because they didn't give me enough money. So the Woman King tells a very good story, because you ever heard of Toya from Haiti, the lady who raised Dessalines, who became a liberator? Well,
I know
Toya,
Mama Dante talks about them.
Toya is one of the Agojis. You understand? Many of the women who would marry the men or raise the men that led the Haitian Revolution, one of the greatest revolutions in the history of the world, right, came from Dahomey. And they were women soldiers. And they took that, even though they'd been captured and defeated by the French, and the French murdered thousands of those women. People don't talk about that, but they were not cowards. They fought to their death. Those women were the same women that created the leaders that led the revolution that brought down Napoleon Bonaparte. Nobody talks about the Haitian Revolution. We destroyed the army of Napoleon Bonaparte in Haiti. And Napoleon would never rise again after Haiti's defeat. So the British can put him in an island off of South Africa for the rest of his life to die. Waterloo came only because we had already destroyed the best of his army in the Caribbean. And it was the women of Dahomey, the Igojis, who people want to put down. They were as good as that movie made them look.
Yeah.
Okay. And study the great Toya that raised the great Dessalines and so many of the others in Haiti. And you see our story is a continuum, and we need to get a greater understanding. I don't think the movie was a put down of Black men at all.
No.
I thought the movie showed a partnership that made sense in African culture.
Yep.
I thought the sister was she's such an extraordinary violinist, an extraordinary actress under any circumstances. But she played the hell of that role. She
I loved it.
really was trained.
I went to watch it with my wife, man, and she loved it.
Yeah. And a lot of the brothers was upset and talking about that. And people saying, oh, they're praising the homie and it was an enslaver. A lot of us right now are selling drugs in the streets of all our cities all over the world. You're an enslaver.
Yes.
Yeah, we're carrying out crimes against our people, murdering our women and children in the streets of America, London, the Caribbean, every day with your gun that you don't even know how to shoot. And you're going to tell me about people under duress fighting against the Portuguese, fighting against the French, trying to figure a thing out that they've been thrust into with the Arabs on the backside, and the Muslims in the northern part of Africa coming down. If we understand history, we'll understand the context in which the homie is taking place. There's a context, a historical context, a geographical context, and a polity that's happening around the homie that it is responding to. You know, the same thing that happened with the Ashantis. And people say, oh, the Ashantis were enslavers. For a period of time, they did sell their prisoners of war. But most of the Ashantis' existence was fighting against enslavement and not enslaving anybody African. And one of the great leaders, Bansu, Asante Heni Bansu, marched his army from Kumasi down to Elmina, wiped the Portuguese out, take control of the Elmina slave dungeon, and then march his army back up to Kumasi. Oh, do we know that history?
No, we don't. No, we don't.
So that's why studying the history of Africa will change our whole point of view.
Yeah.
Have we been into the hinterlands like I've been into northern Ghana and southeastern Burkina Faso and seen the homes built without windows, just slots to shoot our arrows at the enemy. And the opening is on the top. That's we came out to sun and enjoy ourselves. And the 10-foot wall around the compound that had a door 2 foot high, so our enemy, when they come in, you can whack their heads. Do you know how much we fought to defend ourselves against the demon rats?
This we do not know.
You know.
We should bring you back, Mwalimu Small, to talk about how we defended ourselves. Just focus on that. There's so much to teach and to remind each other about. So I look forward to having you back to talk about that.
I look forward to hanging out. You know, we say over here.
Thank you very much.
Right?
Hanging out about history, about culture, about self-love, about finding the divine within. See, finding the divine within you and falling in love with that divine allows you to recognize the divine in others and falling in love with the divine in them. That's true love. That's true love.
I did say to Mwalimu Small before we got on that that was one thing that I walked away with in all the lessons I was listening to of his, when he described what actually loving is. That you have seen the God in the other human being, they've seen the God in you, and you have both fallen in love with the God in you. When you think about that beyond the word God, but essentially what that means, it will have you looking at love in a very different way, in a very, very different way, beyond the as Dr. Uma talks about this. I had to say something to him, the 5'7" thick hipped or whatever, however he describes it, beyond the physical features. You get to appreciate the being, the soul, that person, and what they stand for.
We are the universe. I remember my grandmother taught me a lesson when she was very, very sick. But she didn't let herself be sick. And I was home. I went home to South Carolina. And she had pooped all over herself. And she called me. She says, "Clean me." And I had to clean her and wash her body and dressed her. And I remember at first I said, "How am I going to clean Mama? I've never seen her private spaces." But when I washed her, and she's sitting there smiling, because I realized I come from this woman's belly. I come from this woman's womb. This woman put the first food in my mouth. Her daughter is my mother. This old lady raised me. And when she was about to die, and my mom called me and says, "Come home quickly because your grandma is going to leave. You want to say goodbye, you need to come." So I flew again to South Carolina. She was in the hospital. She asked everybody to leave the room. She said, "James," I said, "You all leave." So everybody left and went out into the hallway. And she said, "Take me up out of here." I said, "You want to go home? You could come back or go home. I'll make sure they take you home." She said, "No, I don't want to go back there. You take me up out of here." She wanted me to take her spirit out of her body for her right there. And I took it. She gave it to me. I am her. When you hear me, you're not hearing me. You're hearing the voodoo woman, hearing the priestess.
Wow.
She lives in this body. She's me. And I was so scared. I didn't know when I realized what she was asking, I was standing in this room and this big man trembling. And she had slid down on her pillow and looked uncomfortable. So I put my arms under her 2 arms and pulled her breast up against me and pulled her back up on the pillows and fixed the pillows. But I didn't know what he had done in that moment. She left the next day.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
thank you very much, sir.
So much we can learn just about ourselves
if
we pay attention.
Yes. Agree. Okay, sir. Just to round up. Sorry, yeah, go on.
No, you go ahead. I was going to remind you, don't forget the question from our last. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. And then how?
Up, sir. Yeah. The last guest who came on, they left a question for you. They didn't know who was coming, but they left a question for you. And the question was, has democracy helped Africa?
No. Matter of fact, what they call in democracy is not democracy at all. What they call in democracy is a fake presentation or a cover presentation for imperialism and colonial dominance of Africa and for the deprivation of the African mind. What the African have, our communal, collective, and cooperative system that existed before we met them is the highest form of democracy on earth that I've seen.
Wow.
Okay. And when we return to that, then the word democracy, which don't even fully describe the communal, collective, cooperative humanity that is really, truly Africa. You go to Africa, even now with all of the fractured and the broken pieces, we are all over the world, not being fair to each other, poverty driving us to want to take from one another. You know, people ask me, say, why you go to Africa? I'll be leaving for Ghana next week, right? And I just got back home. I gotta tell my wife, I gotta go again. And when me and my friends bought a hotel, and we didn't know much about business in Ghana. Beautiful hotel. It's called Sanaa Lodge. My brothers and sisters robbed me blind for the first 12 years. I didn't even know I was being robbed. I'm talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Right? But what am I supposed to do? Except if they knew better, they wouldn't have robbed me because I would have given them everything. And they only did that because they're operating out of a systemic mind space that has been mastered by the enemy. They didn't see me so much as the brother as they saw me as the American who have abundance, right? Because in not knowing who I am to them, I'm them come home. I'm the person that was put on the slave ship.
Right.
I've come back home. I'm the same person, but they don't know that yet because they don't know history. Now, in the course of me, I didn't fire everybody. I had to fire some people. But I didn't fire everybody, and I know everybody knew. And I remember one lady came to me, because they used to be praying, and I go, every time I come to the hotel, they'd be praying. And I said, I told you no church in this hotel, no church. So they finally come and say, oh, Prof, we were praying for you. We knew they were harming you, but we were too scared to say. So we would just pray when you come and pray for you. So for everyone that stole some money from me, there were 10,000 that loved me and said, my son, my brother, my cousin, my friend, welcome home. You understand me? Everywhere I went, the people who loved me, my great king in Esokado, my king in Agogo, where I hold my stool at Nanakofim Bansa II, I'm loved. You understand? I'm revered. Even when I wasn't teaching yet, when I was still just a little professor, still running behind Dr. Jeffries, trying to learn something about Africa, running behind Dr. Clark, because all of them took me to Africa. I can't because just as those brothers who took the money from the hotel, I know more thieves right here in New York who are in my family than even strangers, right?
And this is what people don't understand.
We got to get our mind out of the fight mind and says, okay, I don't expect the blind to see. I don't expect the deaf to hear. I don't expect the mute to talk. It is my responsibility, if I can see and I can talk and I can hear, to find a methodology to help them. Get the blind a seeing eye dog, a walking cane, an eyeglass, or some surgery. I get the one that can't hear, a hearing aid, or another method of doing sign language. But it is my job, if I see the contradiction, that my love for myself is also my love for my brothers and my sisters.
Yes.
So they didn't steal anything from me. I gave them money in an irresponsible way to manage when they did not yet know how to manage money like that. You know? And so I have to take responsibility for that. It's like, even when I was young, there was a couple of young ladies that I thought then I knew what love was, like most of us do. And I thought I fell in love, and I thought they had betrayed me. And I just suffered. I was just so hurt when I realized I knew darn well what their character was, and I wanted them anyway. And so I couldn't blame them. Blame me. I wanted them. I wanted the luscious, beautiful, sexy. And I didn't even stop to find out what truly is your name. Right? So I realized that my friends, those women who were my friends, we were just youngsters growing in the ignorant space the Europeans had put us in together. We heard each other because we didn't know any better. We didn't know any better. I wish there was most of them are ancestors now. I wish they were still alive so I could tell them this. Don't feel guilty about anything. We were just trying to find our way in a place where someone had taken away our ability to know our way. You know, but they know I love them. I was with one of my babies in the Caribbean yesterday, and I spent more time I spent in 3 days with her than I've spent with her in the last 15 years. You know, we talk on the phone and text and all that. That's different from having your baby hug you and say, "Hi, Daddy," in the morning, and kissing you and saying, "Thank you, Daddy." And I'm just in amazement. That's my baby. That's my eldest, you know. That's me. I look at it and go, "Oh my God, that's me." That's me going forward. So Africa is me. There's nothing an African can do to me that would make me stop loving Africa. Period.
Yeah, that's what I'm at.
And the mistakes we make because we're struggling out of the result of imperialism, colonialism, and slavery should be viewed in that context. And because we've got a thing going on over here called the Foundational Black American Movement. And
thank you for talking about it.
I forgot the name of them.
FBA and ADOS.
ADOS, yeah. And I goes like, they're just foolish, frightened children.
Exactly.
Those are all because they don't want the responsibility to fight for the freedom of Africa.
Exactly.
So you want to create yourself an anomaly that is, who would want to be detached from the richest culture in the world, the richest civilization in the world, the richest land in the world, the richest languages in the world, the most beautiful people in the world, the most beautiful women in the world. We handsome too, but our women are so beautiful. And
here they are.
To be some anomaly with no roots, I said, okay, show me your roots. I grew up, if you see my face, you see the earlier African people who came here and meshed with the native people. They're part of my family too. But they came from Africa to begin with. They're no less African than the part of my family who came on the ships with the shackles. We were the same family. And we amalgamated and merged. There's no separate community called ADOS or Foundation of Black American. We merged with the ones who had come from Mali before us. And we merged with the ones who had come before them. And some of them had merged with the Asiatics, who they call Indians. They were Asiatics. But when those Asiatics got here, we were already here. But so what? We're the Aborigine everywhere on the planet Earth.
Yeah.
Are we not? Are we not in Australia, New Zealand, New Guinea, India? We were even in Siberia.
Yes.
But our birth, our umbilical cord is buried in Africa. Our placenta is buried in Africa. There's a scene, and then I'll end with this, on the pallet of Nama in Kemet, where the king is returning to his village. And one of the things you see being carried on the staff is his placenta. When he left his village and he went away, he took his placenta. But when he's going back home to village, his home village, he takes that placenta back with him. Because that's where the blood was spilled. And in the birth of the human being, when God decided, the universe decided to manifest as the human being, it made that decision to do it in the landmass we call Africa. And you can't undo that. I don't want to undo it.
Yeah.
And my brothers and sisters, I understand they're operating out of fear. First, I was angry with them and I tried to fight them. Then I said, no, I called Tariq because I love Tariq because Tariq has done some good work. And he's like a son to me. And we argue and fight. And I've toned him down quite a bit from the languages he was using.
Asante for that.
And I went to one of their rallies to talk about. I'm in the Foundation of Black Americans, teaching them about Pan-Africanism. Understand? So they didn't know what to do with me, except that what I was telling them was the truth, because they're just searching for themselves, and others are misleading them. Our job is to be more prevalent than those who are misleading them, and be more courageous. I will go into I will go to the Adolf house if they invite me and teach them to, but they will never. I call them all the time. They will never respond. They will respond. But those are just, and they don't make up a significant part of our people. Our people know they're African. Our people, when you see any of the holidays that they can find to celebrate their Africanness, most African American will have on African clothing if that's the only thing they can do to identify, or they will give their children African names to identify as they're trying to grow. Those who are afraid to fight the wars for freedom, they want to find a reason not to be responsible for that fight. You know, I want to fight. Make me the barrel of the gun. Make me the sword. I want our people to be free.
Yeah, and for our community, I shared that video by Mzee Omowale, Malcolm X. You can't hate the roots of a tree and not hate that tree. That's what I remember
absolutely. And that's my teacher.
Your
I love that. I love that.
And your brother.
And just remember, Dessalines left us with the key word: freedom or death. There's nothing in between there.
Hey.
Freedom or death.
You know what, sir? Our next speaker, I'm gonna tell you, but I'm gonna ask the question first. What would you like to ask our next speaker who comes on? What question would you like to pose to them? What question would you like to ask our next guest?
I would like to ask them what they would think of Dr. Asa Hilliard saying to be African or not to be at all. What is their response to that statement? To be African or not to be at all?
To be African or not to be at all.
Because that's your option. There is no other option.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to tell you who the next guest is, because she is a very good friend of yours. Very good friend of yours, and you've done a lot of work together. My sister, Enzeli Dantas.
Oh,
yeah.
That's my heart. I spoke to Enzeli yesterday.
Yeah, I know you talk a lot.
She had been up all night, but that is one of the hardest.
It always is.
Black woman in the revolutionary struggle.
Always is.
Yeah, that's my heart.
We talk quite a lot. She talks to you a lot, so I kind of know that you guys talk a lot.
Yeah. So you're bringing a queen with fire. She is truly Ezele Danto. Most people, when they think of the Haitian Revolution, they say, "Oh, the god Ogun," but it wasn't Ogun that led that revolution. It was Ezele Danto.
Yeah,
it was that spirit. Danto that led that revolution. Ogun was one of the soldiers that she. So you're bringing the Queen of Queens when it comes to revolution.
Oh yeah. Okay, look, so after you coming on, I think we're blessed.
She's a warrior.
Yeah.
Please stay on Mwalimu Small. Don't go away. Please stay on.
Yeah. Just to round up, sir, if you want to contact you, if you want to, they want to reach out to you and learn from you, how can they reach out to you, sir? What
support you?
Yeah, on my Facebook page, Professor Small African World.
Okay, I got that.
Professor Small AfricanWorld.com. Yeah. Okay. Or my webpage, ProfessorJamesSmall.com. Okay. But Professor Small African World is where I float all the information and everything that's going on. I try to post it there so you can see what's going on around the world. And you can also leave me messages there. And I think on that page, my phone number is also there. So I don't hide. I put my number out there. Anyone wants to call, can call. I may take a day or two to get back to you, but I'll get back. Baba knows because he was just calling me. I go like, no, he's just calling me every day. But I try to be open to brothers and sisters. And if I can't help you, I will recommend you to somebody who I think might be helpful to you. And this is about learning, relearning who you are, knowing that you're African, not being afraid of that, knowing that you're God having a human experience. That is the basis of our culture. Not being afraid to say, I am God having a human experience. Call me. Okay? And not be afraid something's going to strike you down. You know, they make you think God's going to. No. Without me, the God can't be. Unless I'm a God myself.
Wow.
Then we have competitive gods. Then if you have competitive gods, then there is no God because there's no supreme. You understand? So the only thing that could exist is this one thing. And that is African culture. The white man call it the theory of one, right? He hasn't figured it out. He's trying to figure it out. He knows that's our culture. Our culture is that phenomena that he's calling the theory of one. You understand what I'm saying? You gotta understand. He's constantly trying to figure out how to be us. But he does not have the genetic capacity to hold the cosmetic energy that would allow him to be what Africans have the capacity to be just normally. You understand that? And people say, "Oh, that sounds racist." No, it's not. That's the truth. He does not have the genetic capacity to hold the energy that's necessary to manifest as an African. That's why he creates. We don't need a telephone to communicate. He needs a telephone to communicate. So now we need the telephone to communicate because we've become him. The Dogon tells us we know what the dog star is that the Kemetic talked about. We know Sirius A and Sirius B. And we can't see it with our eyes, so how do we know? Because we can go there when we want and come when we want.
There's no having a limited time conversation with you, because as you say that, I'm thinking of the effects of the telephone on our brothers and sisters in Congo. And that's another conversation we must have.
The next time.
Yes.
We will have that conversation. Don't worry, we'll sort that out.
You notice that most of the things that is in his environment are extensions of the human possibilities. But since he doesn't have the capability, he has used our mind to create the extensions of the human possibility. If you look at most of the inventions that he's talking about, they were all created by Africans. The internet, the computer as we know it, the cell phone, the electricity thing, all of this is us. His corporation and his bank may take credit for it because they had the money and the political power. But the people who were working for them were the Africans.
They started to patent the whole thing.
You know, if you lined up the 50 top inventions and technologies of the last 2 centuries, I guarantee you 75 to 80% will be Africans. You understand? And when we began to know that, then we realized, oh my goodness, they've been playing us. We call it playing you out of pocket when they keep you from saying the truth. It's like the billiard game. You get played out of pocket. And so that's what they do to us. They say, oh, yeah, you did that, but you didn't do it because I own it. I own the patent to it. Yes, but you work for me. So it ain't your invention, it's mine. Because
Amos Wilson talks about that. Yes.
So,
okay, thank you very much, sir, for your time. We thank our community. We thank you, Kumbu Kenny, Imagine Alkebulan, everybody that's been here today. Our father and our elder has shared a lot of wisdom with us. All I have to say, guys, is learn your history. Know who you truly are. Don't look at yourself from the tinted, perverted version of what they've cooked up for you. You are Ubuntu. You are truly. You are truly a God.
Yes.
Thank
and
God
let
for your
our
time.
sisters and our mothers and our daughters understand you are the most sacred thing in existence. Sacred. Without your sacred space, yes, we will present ourselves to you and we will plant that seed. But it is in you that that seed is evolved into the human being.
Wow.
In that 9 months, you create with both your mind, your food, your drinks, your ideas, your concepts and principles. You create what comes out as the next human being. Know that you're God having the human experience. You're that aspect of God that creates. Just that little piece should throw the white man's system in total disarray. Huh?
Thank you very much, my elder. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this broadcast. Please share, reshare. I think everybody needs to watch this over and over again. We'll put it on Spotify next couple of days, but please share this. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Peace and blessings.
Kwaherini, asante.